LSU did it. LSU defeats Alabama 32-31 in overtime in Brian Kelly's first year as head coach of the LSU Tigers. So just how big was that win for Brian Kelly, for this team, and for postseason hopes? We'll get into that on today's edition of Locked on LSU.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thanks for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And I also want to let y'all know that today's edition of Locked on LSU is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I'm your host, as I am every day. I graduated from LSU. I've been covering LSU football since 2016, and I'm now a sports talk radio host in Nashville, Tennessee. But LSU gets it done. That's the story of college football ever since Saturday, is LSU's massive win over Alabama and just how big that is for LSU. And I said on the podcast last week, I said, I've heard a lot of people talking about how LSU is playing with house money for this game against Alabama before the game started, that LSU had nothing to lose. And I explained last week just how much I disagreed with that sentiment, because I look at teams like Northwestern, Ohio State this past week, for example. Northwestern is 1-8. Northwestern literally has nothing to lose. You could also argue that they have nothing to play for. But Northwestern is literally playing with house money. They have nothing to lose. And they were able to keep that game against Ohio State a little bit closer than at least I expected it to. But LSU wasn't playing with house money because LSU had something to lose. Even though I didn't and you didn't and a whole lot of college football talking heads didn't expect LSU to be in this situation, to be potentially playing for an SEC title, to be in a top 10 spot in the college football playoff rankings, to be able to have discussions about should Jayden Daniels be getting Heisman recognition. Even though I didn't expect any of those conversations to be realistic conversations to be had, they still were on the line. If you lose against Alabama, you still have that to lose. Even though you didn't expect it, even though it's Brian Kelly's first year, all of those conversations come to a screeching halt if you lose to Alabama. So I disagreed with the fact that LSU was playing for house money, because I thought a win over Alabama would be so huge for so many reasons for LSU. So I want to highlight just how big that Alabama win was. And I sat down to try and think about, just exactly how big it was and for how many ways that this team will be affected, or that the aftermath will be affected because of this win. I came up with 5 things. 5 reasons why the Alabama win was just so freaking massive. I mean, first and foremost, the environment of Tiger Stadium and how exciting it was and how loud it was. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there, but I've heard from every single person that was there that it felt like Tiger Stadium is back. Tiger Stadium hasn't felt like this since 2019. So I think that in terms of fan buy-in and fan faith, that environment and having that kind of buy-in from the fan base and excitement from the fan base in such a big game like this, where we couldn't say the past 2 years that the Alabama game could be competitive, or at least we didn't expect it to be. It was probably a little bit more competitive than it needed to be last year. But I think just that is the biggest testament to a team being successful and a fan base being excited, is just how rowdy that environment really was. So that was one thing, and it might seem a little bit trivial, but I think that kind of stuff matters to me. The second thing, and it kind of goes along with the environment, but it's recruiting. LSU had so many recruits in the building on Saturday, and getting a win like that in that environment. I mean, we thought the Ole Miss game was huge. I talked to John Garcia, the senior insider of recruiting at SI.com, about how big that Ole Miss win was for recruiting. And he said, that's invaluable. An environment like that, rushing the field, beating a top 10 team, giving Ole Miss their first loss of the season, that's huge for recruiting. Take another step up and up to the next level. And that's what the Alabama game was. because the environment was just that much better. The game was that much bigger. It's freaking Bama, and LSU beat Alabama with all of those 4 and 5 stars on the sidelines that are probably trying to decide between LSU and maybe an Alabama, or LSU or maybe another SEC team or another big time football program. And they were in the building that night experiencing just the environment of Tiger Stadium, getting to watch firsthand just how good of a football team LSU truly is. So I think that the recruits that were there, that's huge because they got to experience that. But even recruits that weren't there, seeing LSU get a win over Alabama, that would make me as a recruit that much more excited to either go back to LSU, or if I'm on the fence between LSU and another school, maybe that pushes me more to go on the LSU side of things rather than maybe other school that they are kind of tied between. So I think recruiting this game, winning this big game in just Brian Kelly's first year is huge for recruits. The third thing, and kind of the rest of my points are more, football related. You're now in control of the SEC West. Now LSU controls their own destiny. You get a win against Arkansas this weekend, and LSU punches their ticket to Atlanta. And I'm not going to assume that LSU is going to win this game. They should win this game, and they should at least beat Arkansas and or A&M. I'm not going to assume those things. This is a really difficult league for a reason, but they should win those games. If you beat Bama and you beat Ole Miss, then you should beat Arkansas, a team that just lost to Liberty. So now LSU holds control of the SEC West in Brian Kelly's first year, and they are just one win away from one SEC West win, rather, away from punching their ticket to the SEC championship. That's huge. LSU now has a path to the college football playoff, and we can at least have a conversation about what that would look like. If LSU runs the table, LSU wins out, LSU goes to Atlanta, LSU plays Georgia in the SEC championship, LSU beats Georgia in the SEC championship, LSU would have a really strong resume to make it in that top 4. Now, there's a lot of, caveats there, and I want to get into exactly what that would look like on tomorrow's episode, get into a little bit more depth about LSU's path to the CFP. But that is just how big this game was, because now LSU you can have a conversation about LSU potentially competing for a national title again in Brian Kelly's first year. The final thing is kind of this statement to the college football world. Because I think after LSU hired Brian Kelly, there was a lot of skepticism. I want to get into a little bit more about that coming up next. A lot of skepticism, both inside the LSU fan base and outside, just the college football world in general. After that loss to Florida State, there was a whole lot of conversation about Brian Kelly and is he going to win at LSU? And, what is LSU doing hiring Brian Kelly? What has he really done for this program after, just an awful game against Florida State, a brutal way to start the season? This is a statement to the college football world that LSU is legit. Because I work with a lot of non-LSU fans, SEC football fans and college football fans, but they're not necessarily LSU fans. And I don't think that the win over Ole Miss was necessarily as big of a statement to those on the outside looking in. They didn't really realize that LSU would even have a path to the SEC championship if they beat Alabama. I think a lot of people that are outside of the LSU fan base weren't giving LSU enough credit because their perception of LSU was more so a loss to Florida State rather than a big statement win against Ole Miss, an undefeated team. But when you beat Alabama, everybody's put on notice. Everybody views you as a contender and as an elite team. And now that LSU has done that, that's how the outside world views LSU, an elite team and a contender. So that is just how big that Alabama win was. A rivalry win and, getting another SEC West win and finally, getting the monkey off of Brian Kelly's back of beating Alabama. After all week he was saying about how great that team is, how great of a coach Nick Saban is, those are all true things. Those are all important things. Beating Alabama in and of itself is massive. But with all of the repercussions, that adds even more to it. Adds even more layers of just how important, how big that win was against Alabama. But coming up next, I think that we all owe a couple people an apology, and I'll explain why coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. Because these days, Every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. And you care about your small business and you don't want to make any risky decisions. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. So that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. So I work for a radio station, and of course, it's the busiest time of year with football season. And we had somebody that was very integral to all of our operations and very important to the everyday operations of the radio station pursue a different opportunity. So we were all scrambling, trying to find a way to fill that position. So we went to LinkedIn Jobs and we found the solution. We found the right candidate to be able to choose to be able to fill in that role. So all you have to do is go to linkedin.com and add your purple hiring frame to your profile and spread the word that you are hiring. They've got simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you don't have to worry about filtering through all of the unqualified candidates. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/college. LinkedIn.com/locked-on-college rather. That's LinkedIn.com/locked-on-college to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen today. Check us out on your preferred podcast platform, but we're also on YouTube as well. So you can listen to the podcast on the go, and you can also watch the podcast, throw it up on your computer, your phone, your smart TV, whatever it is that you like to watch your YouTube videos on. But for your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most, the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So I think that there are two certain people that probably deserve apologies, and they proved that on Saturday night. And I'm going to be completely honest. There's one person that I was a little bit skeptical of. There was one person that I wasn't. There was one person that a lot of other people were skeptical of. These two people caught a lot of flack, both from LSU fans and the college football world in general. They got a lot of flack from a lot of different people about not being the right fit or not being good enough or, not being the key to get LSU to victory. And I think these two people deserve an apology. Maybe not from me necessarily, maybe from me, maybe not from you or maybe from you, but I'm just saying in general, these two people have earned the respect that they haven't been getting all season long. First and foremost, we need to put some respect on Jayden Daniels' name. I think the college football world needs to put some respect on Jayden Daniels' name. And I'll be honest with y'all. I mean, from the very beginning of the quarterback battle between Jayden Daniels and Miles Brennan and Garrett Nussmeier and Walker Howard, from the very beginning, I said Jayden Daniels is going to win this position. Jayden Daniels is going to be the starting quarterback at LSU. He had the most experience. Miles Brennan had been at LSU for a billion years, but he also hadn't played football in 2 years. Jayden Daniels already had like 30-something games under his belt as a starter at Arizona State. Jayden Daniels had the skill set that Mike Denbrock was able to work with and bring Cincinnati to a college football playoff. Very mobile first, very, talented running quarterback like he had in Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati. And Jayden Daniels, in the beginning of the season, was less than impressive. Jayden Daniels proved that maybe he is just a running quarterback, or at least gave us reason to believe that maybe he was just a mobile quarterback that couldn't throw the ball and could really only move the ball downfield with his legs. Maybe Jayden Daniels wasn't the answer and was just kind of the quarterback that we needed to have until the next guy comes in next year. But this game against Alabama, also against Florida, also against Ole Miss, but especially this game against Alabama, the third elite performance in a row, and also in one of the biggest stages in college football against LSU's biggest rival. And Jayden Daniels went toe-to-toe with who I think is the best quarterback in college football. Jayden Daniels went toe-to-toe with Bryce Young. Jayden Daniels proved that the Alabama game, when everything was on the line, that moment was not too big for him. That he was able to step up to the plate and deliver when LSU needed it most. That even if LSU, was facing adversity, or even if LSU wasn't able to move the ball exactly how they wanted, Jayden Daniels was still in firm control of that offense. Jayden Daniels was performing with a certain decorum of just calm, cool, and collectedness that we have seen him have over the past 3 weeks, ever since that Florida game, that maybe we didn't see earlier on in the season. But doing it against Alabama proves that Jayden Daniels is the starting quarterback of this team for a reason, that he won this starting job for a reason, because the stage wasn't too big for him because he's been there before. Maybe not an LSU Alabama game, but he started big games before because he started a lot of games before. Jayden Daniels proved that all of the negative talk maybe at the beginning of the season, even though it was valid, even though fans had very fair concerns about what Jayden Daniels could do, I think he's proven everyone that, hey, you were wrong. You were wrong because I can quarterback this offense. The second person, and I think that this is the biggest thing, is Brian Kelly. I think that after an entire offseason of making fun of his Southern accent and making fun of his dance moves and talking about the quote unquote culture fit, that he just silenced all of that. I mean, the whole, two things I want to get into there. The whole bad culture fit thing, I've never believed in. And I can't remember if I've said this on the podcast before or not, but I'm sure I have. I said the culture at LSU, although Louisiana is different than any other state in the country, although there is a different culture in Louisiana than there is anywhere else, the culture of LSU football is winning. I don't care where you're from. Nick Saban's not from Louisiana, and he won a championship with LSU. Nick Saban's not from Alabama, and he's won plenty there. Les Miles is from Oklahoma. Les Miles is not some homegrown Louisiana boy. They won national championships at LSU. What makes Brian Kelly different? The culture at LSU is winning. And if you win football games, you will be a good culture fit. So I don't want to hear any more of this bad culture fit criticism. The Southern accent thing. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times people, friends of mine who aren't LSU fans have, made fun of my family. And I said, you know what? Like, I'm so ready for LSU to just win games. And I'm so excited for Brian Kelly to start winning games so we can finally give up this really annoying shtick of Brian Kelly's Southern accent and Brian Kelly's dance moves, because winning shuts everybody up. And I think that's exactly what happened on Saturday, because the conversations that Paul Feinbaum had about Brian Kelly, for example, after the Florida State loss, those have stopped. This was Paul Feinbaum after the Florida State loss.
LSU paid $10 million for that, Greeny. That was my takeaway at midnight last night, because it makes perfect sense to go for two. He just went 99 yards. It was a perfect executed drive, and Florida State's defense is forget on its heels. I mean, they're on their back. And do you want to keep playing when you've played that poorly? No.
Yeah, we're not having those conversations anymore. The LSU's paying $10 million for this. LSU's paying $10 million because Brian Kelly just beat Alabama in his first year. That's what LSU is paying Brian Kelly $10 million for. So I don't want to hear any more of this bad culture fit, bad coach, Southern accent. I don't want to hear any of that anymore, because Brian Kelly proved that he can do something that only a handful of LSU coaches have been able to do in the past. I mean, Les Miles, for example. Les Miles was at LSU for 11 and a half years. Let's just say 12 seasons. And Les Miles was able to beat Alabama 3 times. One of those was in Nick Saban's first year at Alabama. Ed Orgeron was only able to beat Alabama once in the 2019 season. And Ed Orgeron was there 2017, 18, 19, 20, and 21. 5 seasons, beat Alabama once. Brian Kelly, on the other hand, has been at LSU for 1 season and has beaten Alabama once. Put some respect in that man's name. But coming up next, is there a really bright future for a certain position group at LSU that was highlighted on Saturday night? I want to get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I got to tell you about betonline.net, because, of course, it is your #1 source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. So you can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. There's football, basketball, soccer, esports. They have got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at betonline as well. That's what I love about betonline is it's not just betting. It's not just a sports book. They've got a bunch of information as well. So we are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or you use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. So there's a position group that I figured would blossom under Brian Kelly. I just didn't think that this year was the year. But on Saturday, it proved to me that I could be dead wrong. And maybe that position group under Brian Kelly and the usage of this position group is proving me wrong this year and is proving me right that it's going to be very strong in the future. Is LSU the future of tight end university? I think that after Saturday, we can have a serious conversation about that. Because going into this season, I said, look, I'm really excited to see how Mike Denbrock and Brian Kelly use the tight end position because they have a very rich history of really strong tight end play. I mean, Notre Dame is known as tight end university. And I don't think that's a coincidence that that's where Brian Kelly was for the last 10 or so years. The usage of tight ends is really creative and really fun, what we've seen from Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock. But I went into the season saying, look, like the talent and the depth in LSU's tight end room this year just isn't necessarily there for Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock to really flaunt the tight end position. So, I didn't think that we were going to see the tight ends used as much this year as we have. I thought, how are you going to utilize these tight ends when you've got one of the more talented wide receiving rooms in the country? And I even criticized Mike Denbrock earlier this season. I believe it was after the Auburn game. He said, what are you doing throwing the ball to the freshman tight end and not utilizing the wide receiver core? And I still stand by that because it was less about Mason Taylor and it was more about this wide receiver core. I thought, why keep going to the inexperienced freshmen? Go to your receivers. Go to your receivers who are, certified All-Americans. Go to your receivers, one of which was going to be a top, NFL draft pick. But I still kind of stand by that. But the evolution of Mason Taylor and the usage of him on Saturday night and the way that he's been used all season long makes me so confident and honestly so excited about the future of the tight end position at LSU. Tight end has never really been, a strong suit for LSU. You got Foster Moreau in the league, but it's not like he's a guy who's going to be, making the Pro Bowl year in and year out. It's not like Foster Moreau or Thaddeus Moss were the drivers of the 2019 national championship team. I know Foster wasn't in that team, but, it wasn't like Foster on the teams that he was on was, the number one marquee guy that everybody knows. He was a very good player, as was Thaddeus Moss. I mean, let's not forget, Foster Moreau was number 18 and a big-time leader in the locker room. Thaddeus Moss with the tiptoe was one of the biggest reasons why LSU beat Alabama in 2019. I'm not undermining their contributions to the teams in recent history, but I'm just saying LSU's not known for tight end play. LSU doesn't have, the same kind of presence in the NFL at the tight end position that they do maybe at DB or defensive line or wide receiver, so on and so forth, running back, so on and so forth. Tight end just hasn't been LSU's strong suit because that hasn't been quote unquote LSU ball in the past. It's been hard nosed, run the ball or air the ball out with really solid wide receivers. But with Mason Taylor, I think we're seeing the development of a potential LSU being tight end university. Because Mason Taylor, just looking at his stats on Saturday night, he had 3 receptions for 36 yards. It was his second best game on the season so far behind Ole Miss, where he had 3 receptions, 44 yards, and a touchdown. But Mason Taylor had a big touchdown when LSU was down 17-21 in the fourth quarter. Big touchdown to go up 24-21 in the fourth quarter. And of course, the biggest play of the game, the 2-point conversion in overtime for LSU to win the game. So I think what we're seeing here is a wonderful development of Mason Taylor, first and foremost, a true freshman who has been, a big contributor to this offense all season long. He's had at least 1 catch in every single game so far this season. But I think it's also the development of the tight end position, the development of this offense as a whole. Because it's not just about Mason Taylor, because Mason Taylor is a fantastic player. And it's somebody that Brian Kelly even put us on notice of earlier this season.
Probably the number one surprise of camp is we hit a home run with Mason Taylor, the son of NFL Hall of Famer Jason Taylor. He has been outstanding. I've been blessed. I've had some great tight ends. I've got 7 of them right now that are active in the NFL. And Mason Taylor is as good of any freshman tight end that I've had. He is outstanding.
And he's living up to the praise that Brian Kelly was giving him going into this season. He is living up to that because he is a staple of this offense. It's not just about him and his development, although that's so important and it's going to just continue to grow year over year. It's also about what LSU is establishing at that position. Because in 2023, they've got a 4-star out of St. Louis, Missouri, Mac Markway, 4-star tight end coming in to add some depth to that room. 2024, they've got a 4-star Tavion Galloway coming in, who I just absolutely adore, seeing all of his tweets and how excited he is about coming into LSU in a couple of years. But Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock are establishing a reputation at LSU that I don't think LSU has ever had. And it's the tight end position and the usage of the tight end position and how this offense can kind of reach a different dimension or just a different identity with the tight end position. And I think we saw that with Mason Taylor. And we have to give Mason Taylor some serious props because in the biggest play of the game, the biggest play of the biggest game of the season, it was the true freshman Mason Taylor that came up with the big play. And that cannot be understated enough. So Mason Taylor, he himself as a player in his own development throughout the season, and the tight end position at LSU and how that's going to evolve over time, how Brian Kelly and Mike Denbrock, I feel like, are inevitably going to bring that notorious tight end usage into LSU. I'm excited for that. And I think that you should be too. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And coming up on tomorrow's episode, some conversations that I think we can start having, that I know we can start having, that I thought would have been ridiculous to have at the beginning of the season. We'll get into that in tomorrow's episode. But for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. It's the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.